Welcome to AssistEdge RPA Advanced Web Automation webinar. Many a times, while automating a web application, one can come across different scenarios which can act as a blocker in further automation process of web application. This can be automated using advanced capabilities provided by AssistEdge RPA Automation Studio. Now, before going forward, let us look at the agenda for this webinar. We are going to talk about different topics that can be used for web application automation. ShiftClick Interaction, execute JavaScript, other interactions, dynamic selectors, code editor activity, and pop-up handling. Let us understand these topics in detail. ShiftClick Interaction can be performed on a web-based application depending on the type of UI element as per the requirement. It appears only when you want to capture action on a button or a link. This interaction opens the URL associated with the selected link or the button in a new window. One can capture interactions from both the tabs after configuring ShiftClick Interaction from the web mode of the multimodal interface. Execute JavaScript. This activity allows you to perform automation of controls on a web page where a JavaScript is present. It can be helpful in different scenarios where any of the controls on a web page do not get automated using the web application automation method. Note, the execute JavaScript activity can be used only inside an application activity where application type is set to web apps. Now, let us talk about other interactions that can add to web automation. Scroll by interaction. It scrolls to a particular section of the web page horizontally or vertically. Scroll into. Interaction scrolls to bring the application area viewable on screen of the web browser. Open context menu interaction, using which one can perform right-click on a page. It is useful when one wants to save the web page for reference. Now let us talk about dynamic selectors. In case of certain UI element who have dynamic selectors can be automated by passing the selector value through automation. It provides manual way of identifying the UI element by passing the selector value dynamically. Code editor activity to automate certain fields in an application that are not configurable using Studio. Also, it helps us to perform some operations on the field extracted from the application automation. Code editor activity is added only inside the application activity. Pop-up handling. One can automate performing actions on a pop-up dialog window in front of the web window or an Excel application. Examples of pop-up window are authentication pop-up, confirmation alert, and so on. For handling, we have two activity available in pop-up handler and pop-up handler. This activity must be used inside an application activity or the system displays the error. Let's start with understanding ShiftClick Interaction, that is automating a web page available in a new window. Now consider that in this particular screenshot where you can see the screenshot of the EdgeVerve website, a user wants to perform a shift-click operation on the click order, create order tab. Now once when he clicks on this create order tab, this particular page opens into a new tab altogether. Say a user wants to perform interactions. Now from normal automation scenario this cannot be achieved, but using the shift-click interaction one can achieve this particular scenario. Now let us discuss about the different steps to configure the shift-click interaction. The first step is to select the action as shift-click. Be it a hyperlink or a button, the action to be configured on that particular button or a hyperlink is shift-click. Secondly, press the shift button and click on that particular link or button. it will open all together into a new tab. Now, copy the URL of the new window opened in the target URL of the properties section. Once the target URL is configured and you have mentioned the user choice tab name, click on the dock action click button. Once you have clicked on the click button, you will see a ribbon gets visible above the web mode, which holds the attached windows for automation. Now, one can easily configure different interactions on a new tab. Now let us look at this scenario into the Automation Studio. Now in the Automation Studio, I will create a new process and drag and drop the application activity. In the application activity, I will select the application type as Web Apps and type in the application name. Then I will click on to the Settings button, which will help me to configure different interactions. Once my application is launched, I will manually enter the application credentials. Now in this particular EdgeVerve application, we are supposed to automate the create order using the ShiftClick Interaction. So I have configured the ShiftClick Interaction. Now I will press the Shift key and open the create order into a new tab and copy the target URL into the target URL properties. Next, I will name the tab name as per user choice. And then I am going to click on the click button of dock action. As and when I clicked on the click button of dock action, we can see here above a ribbon has come, which consists of both the tabs, that is the orders and the create orders tab. Now I can anytime select any of these tabs and configure my interactions above these tabs. So before configuring any action, let me quickly save the ShiftClick interaction first. Let me quickly put the display name and save this interaction. And then I am going to configure these fields within my new open tab. Say the order name, the origin pin and the destination pin. So I'll quickly configure these. Now that we have configured these interactions, let me quickly go back to the Automation Studio and then we will create the arguments. Once I have created the arguments, I will quickly set up the environment. I will mention the username and credentials of the EdgeVerve application, and once the application is set up environment is completed, I will quickly test run the process. Now as and when I test run the process, the website will first click on the create order. It will open the new tab for me and hence it will start configuring those fields, putting the order name, origin pin and destination pin. Hence our automation is successful. Let's now understand the execute JavaScript activity, where we are going to automate a web page controls using the JavaScript logic. Now, in our case, the user wants to extract the first order name from the table data, for which he is going to use the JavaScript logic. Now, I am going to use the execute JavaScript activity, for which I have already added the web application in the Automation Studio, and now I'm going to drag and drop the execute JavaScript activity. Now this is the JavaScript activity, and here we have the script editor. I'm just going to paste the JavaScript, which also has a return parameter. Now I will create an output argument and then select it from the drop down. Here we have used the JavaScript in order to extract the seller name from the invoices table. So I'm just going to write the seller name to the output console of the Automation Studio. Before running the execute JavaScript activity, I will also perform a click operation on the invoices tab. Now I'm going to set up the environment and enter the credentials. We will wait for the environment to set up. Now that the environment is setting up, it has entered the username and password. Now I will quickly test run the process. Now when I test run the process in the output console, I could see that the seller name is visible. Seller name present in the invoice. Now we are going to talk about the other interactions which involve different type of actions like scroll by and scroll into view, which are going to scroll over a particular location on a web page. Likewise, user can also scroll at the end or some coordinates of the web page as well. The next interaction that we are going to talk about is the right click on a page. Anytime anyone wants to save an HTML page, one is supposed to right click on a particular page. Now that right click can be performed using the action named as Open Context Menu. You can also automate the process of printing an HTML page for details purpose. Now we are going to talk about the code editor activity. So as we have discussed earlier, the code activity is used when we have to automate certain fields in an application that are not configurable using Studio. Secondly, if we want to perform some operation on the field extracted from an application automation. So now let us first look at the Visual Studio, where we have a code editor sample and all the product DLLs are being referenced to. It has an interface named iCode editor, which has been implemented, which consists of an event followed by a perform action function within which all the execution will take place. We can also see that the code is implemented within the perform action function, and all the reference DLLs have been added to this particular project. Now we can easily build this project, and the DLL created will be the code editor DLL. Now we have come to the Automation Studio. First of all, let me just drag and drop the application activity within which a code editor activity should be used. Now I'll select my application type and application, and I'll double click on this particular activity. I'll write down code editor and drag and drop the code editor activity. Now here, this is the UI of code editor, where from here itself through the script editor you can add your code, you can compile, and also when it is perfectly compiled you can even upload the code. Now this editor followed by you can add your references directly from here, which opens the file explorer. And now that we have looked to the script editor, now here we have an add DLL option, where if you have created your DLL from the Visual Studio, you can directly add your DLL and automatically the class will be populated. You can also, for the code editor, you can also map the output parameters. Now that we have just right line the output value, let us just set up the environment and test run the process. So from this code editor, it it is actually fetching the value of total orders that are visible on the orders page. So the environment is set up. Let me just quickly test run the process. Now that I have test run the process, on the output console I can see the total orders value available. This is how code editor activity is used. Next is the dynamic selectors. Now if user wants to say fetch some value from a button, but if that selector value has a dynamic value, how can one simply pass those dynamic values from an argument itself? So we are going to see here that how can we pass the selector value dynamically using the argument. Now let us jump to the Automation Studio, where I have already configured the application, and now I'm going to manually log in into my EdgeVerve application, where I'm going to put my username and password, and then I'm going to click on to the login button. Now here there is this clear orders button. Now I will configure a simple click on this particular button, and this button has certain selectors that can be configured. For now it is just ID, which is a random ID that is generated, and our clear orders button has the dynamic IDs being generated every time a person reloads an application. So we have different type of selectors like CSS3 selector, inner text, CSS3 path, manual. Anytime we can set their order on the basis of which we want it to search on the website. We also have an option of manually selecting our selector, where all the attributes for a particular element are pre-configured. Now let us have a look at this particular orders application, where for the clear orders button, every time we reload this particular ID, that is the selector ID of this element, keeps changing. Now how can we configure this into the Automation Studio? Now that we have already configured the clear orders interaction and created our own argument to pass the dynamic selector, that is DS value. Now we can select different attributes depending upon whichever you want to pass in the argument. Now here I'm going to select my argument and uncheck the checkbox. I will select the condition that is contains, which will automatically generate the generated selector, and then I will click on the add button. Now I'll save the changes, and then I will enter the argument value in the default value. Anytime you can pass the selector's value into the argument using the process inputs as well. Now let me just enter the default value and then set up the environment. Now the environment setup is done. Now let us quickly go to the Automation Studio and test run the process. As we have passed the selector value that is going to be generated using the arguments and manual configuration. So yes, it has successfully clicked onto the clear orders button, where this pop-up is now visible in order to confirm that yes, do you want to delete all the orders? Now with this we are going to continue with the concept of pop-up handler and Windows pop-up handler. So pop-up handler is any pop-up which appears on the web page, which consists of a control ID and a control type, and that can be easily configured using the pop-up window caption. Likewise, we have another pop-up handler, that is the Windows pop-up handler. Next, I'm going to drag and drop the with pop-up handler activity I'm going to click onto the settings button, which contains the attach behavior. Now attach behavior is the string operation related to the window title. Now anytime you are sure about the window title, your attach behavior can be equals. Anytime you know the starting string of the window title, you can use the start with, ends with, or contains. For now I'm going to use the contains, and I will mention the window title of my web page, that is the orders page. Now then I'm going to click on to the add button, which adds the application control for that particular window. Now likewise, when I click on to the field configuration button, then another window which consists of the automation elements tree known as the advanced configuration window opens. Now here in this particular window, we can see that there is a pop-up frame that is captured which says localhost 5204/, which is the heading of our pop-up. Then we can easily capture the control ID of OK and cancel button. Now here I will try and capture the OK and cancel button, and then which will reflect into my automation studio as a single configuration. Now when I click on to the settings button, you can see here I have configured the action as click action over the OK button, and the control ID, the container name, the control index, everything has been captured properly. Now what I will do is I will directly go and set up the environment and then quickly test run the process. In our scenario, it should actually click onto the OK button of the pop-up. So let me quickly test run the process. And now when it clicked on the clear orders, it clicked on to the OK button of the pop-up, which clears all the orders. This is how we can handle the pop-ups existing into the web application. In this webinar, we have learned various capabilities around advanced web automation. Thank you.